Hey everybody, Tim Albrecht here, and thank you for listening to the YFP podcast, where each week we strive to inspire and encourage you on your path towards achieving financial freedom. This week I had a chance to welcome back a friend of the show, Nate Hedrick, the Real Estate RPh and co-host of the YFP Real Estate Investing podcast. Some of my favorite moments from the show include hearing Nate describe the 4 areas you should be evaluating when reviewing home listings on the MLS or various sites like Redfin, Zillow, or Realtor.com. The real reason open houses exist and why a private showing is preferred over an open house, how the agents get paid, and why as the buyer it's in your best interest to have your own agent, and how the home buying concierge service that Nate developed can help a first-time home buyer navigate the process from beginning to end. Folks can learn more about that concierge service and get connected with a local agent by visiting yourfinancialpharmacist.com and then click on home buying at the top of the page. Before we jump into the show, I recognize that many listeners may not be aware of what the team at YFP Planning does in working one-on-one with more than 240 households in 40 plus states. YFP Planning offers fee-only, high-touch financial planning that is customized for the pharmacy professional. If you're interested in learning more about how working one-on-one with a certified financial planner may help you achieve your financial goals, you can book a free discovery call at yfpplanning.com. Whether or not YFP Planning's financial planning services are a good fit for you, know that we appreciate your support of this podcast and our mission to help pharmacists achieve financial freedom. Okay, here's my interview with Nate Hedrick, the Real Estate RPh. Nate, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Tim, always great to be here.
So you and I both know that searching for a house can be an overwhelming process. I've gone through the process twice, to be honest. As exciting as it was at times, it was stressful. Not sure I really want to do it again. But here's the thing, on one hand, we have great access to data, right? With services like Zillow, Redfin, I'm a fan, Realtor.com, that pulls information from the multiple listing service, the MLS, all over the country. But on the other hand, there's not a lot of direction on what to do with all that information. What's important? How do I schedule a showing? When is the next open house? How do I submit an offer? And so today, we're bringing you back on the show to talk and walk us through how to navigate all of this. But before we jump in to our interview, I want to make sure to remind our listeners that there are some really important financial steps that you should be taking to make sure you're actually ready to purchase a home, right? Before we go down the rabbit hole that can be searching. And so Nate put together a great article on how to manage buying a house despite having student loan debt. We're going to link to that in the show notes. That was on the YFP blog. And we've done a few podcast episodes dating way back to September 2018, when we talked through 6 steps to buying a home. That was a 2-part series. We did episodes 64 and 65. Again, we'll link to those in the show notes. So these articles, these episodes, really important that we're laying the foundation. Are we ready before we get into the search? So Nate, let's assume our listeners have done that upfront work. They're pre-approved with a lender, and now they're actually ready to search. Of course, there are sites like Zillow and Redfin, but are those the best places to search for homes?
Yeah, I mean, those sites are fine and really great in many cases, but one of the problems with those sites is that they can be out of date, right? So what those sites do, in effect, is they pull data, like you mentioned, they pull data from the multiple listing service, which is really the source of truth. And it's updated by real estate agents. And until those sites are updated, the sites like Zillow and Redfin can't pull the new data. And sometimes they do that scraping slowly, and sometimes they do it more quickly. I have seen examples multiple times where clients have reached out and said, "Oh, Nate, can we go look at this place? It looks gorgeous. I saw that it just came on the market. And 3 days ago it was pending, but the site, for whatever reason, didn't grab that MLS data and update it. But as soon as I logged in, I could actually see the information." So the sites are awesome for doing upfront searches, looking at history. They're very good at looking backward at historical data of what has sold. But truthfully, if you want to get up to the minute true information, you need to get an agent who can get you access to the MLS so that you can get that data directly.
Yeah, I remember, Nate, I'm sure all agents do this differently, but back in, 2009, when Jess and I moved to Northeast Ohio working with an agent, they had like an MLS portal that we could log in and view, and just seeing the differences, as you mentioned, between that and Realtor.com, Redfin, where, we'd be really excited about a property contingent, and it was already pending sale. So, Before we go further, we throw around MLS a lot. Can you just break that down a little bit further? What is the MLS? And obviously, that's going to be an important piece of what we're talking about here today.
Yeah. So the MLS is, like I said, the multiple listing service. And what this is basically an agreement between the brokerages of a particular area or a particular state. And the MLSs are divided into regions, right? So they can be the entire state. They can be just a large city area. It depends on where you're located. Basically, the brokerages or the real estate associations within that area have gotten together and said, we agree to share data between our brokerages. And the MLS is how we're going to share that data. And so brokerages will upload information directly into this database that's managed by sort of an independent organization. And that organization puts out that information for everyone to be able to access. And again, what that allows other real estate agents and professionals to do is to look at that information in real time so that decisions can be made, much more quickly.
And so, Nate, as you mentioned, sites like Zillow, sites like Redfin, sites like Realtor.com, those are pulling from the MLS, correct?
Correct. They have some sort of agreement in place where they can, again, scrape that data from the MLS and then show it in whatever way they'd like to.
So, Nate, I think all of us can relate to pulling up a listing, browsing pictures from our couch, but there are important things that people should be looking for when they're digging through a listing. Talk about what are those things that folks should be looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like pulling up a patient profile before rounds, right? There's a ton of data to sort through, and it can be important to narrow things down. Like you said, it's really easy to sit there and just look at the pictures up front and dream about being in that particular house. But there's actually a lot of great data there. And if you understand what's available to you, you can glean a lot of information from it. So I'll break it down. 4 main categories, I think, is how we can do this. So the first is the obvious one, right? The pictures and the video. And you can use this information for a lot of things. It's not just looking at the cosmetics, but you can also look for things like, are there obvious problems? For example, is the roof look like from the photos that it has problems? Or is there damage within the property that you can see in the photos? And sometimes it's not just what's being included, but it's what's excluded as well. Just like a missing lab value might tell you more than the myriad of in-range results that you get for a particular patient, pictures that are missing can be really telling too. So if they say they've got a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house, but there's only one picture of one updated bathroom, it starts to make you wonder, well, what's going on with those other 2? Is one of them like hidden in the basement somewhere and never been updated, and the other one's full of wallpaper that totally out of date? Like, the things that are missing can be just as evident from the things that are present. So I look at those pictures, but also look at what's not in the pictures. And then, like I mentioned before, if you're getting access to the MLS, a lot of times you'll see brokers or real estate agents posting video walkthroughs. And a lot of times the sites like Zillow and Redfin and things like that can't pull that data or may not have access to those videos. And so asking your agent, hey, can you give me access, or is there a video of a walkthrough? And you can get that directly through the MLS. That's kind of the first one. The next thing you want to look at is your stats, right? These are all of your basic information about that house. Everything from bedroom and bathroom count, like I mentioned, things like square footage above and below grade. And seeing where that information is coming from is really important too, right? Even as I go to list a property, the seller might say, yeah, this is 4 bedrooms. Here are the 4 bedrooms. You can count them. But if the county records indicate that it's only a 3-bedroom house, or it's been, certified as a 3-bedroom house through whatever past history, that 4th bedroom might either not be in the records for a very good reason, or it might not actually not count as a bedroom. So again, think about that data and where it's coming from. The other things you'll see is things like the year that the house was built. And that can help you look at things like, okay, well, if it was built before 1978, for example, there might be lead-based paint in the house. And so I need to start thinking about that. And if it was built before 1950s, there might be knob and tube wiring. And so the year that it was built can tell you a lot as well. The last thing you want to look for there is things like the heating and cooling types. Some people, again, depending on your area, this can be much more important than in certain locations, but understanding what type of heating is in that property. Does it have an air conditioner? Does it have a boiler? Does it have, whatever? All that can be listed right there for you and can provide you a lot of information. The next sort of data point to look for is the government data. So these are things usually displayed by the county that is listed on these websites and through the MLS. And that's everything from school district, the property taxes. You can actually look at property lines and the parcel itself. You should be able to determine zoning from this. You can see if it's zoned residential or mixed use or commercial. And then again, like I said, past sales or rent prices will be listed there as well. And that's all through usually the county website and available. And then that 4th piece is really the narrative. This is kind of the physician's notes, and if it were our patient example, but it's what's included with the property. It's what the seller wanted to tell you about it. It's how they're trying to sell it. Things like disclosures from the listing description or broker's notes that can be available through the MLS again. So there's a lot of pieces that you can look for on just what seems like a simple place to check out pictures.
Nate, that was great stuff. You talked about 4 areas: pictures and the video, the stats, the government data, the narrative. And as you were talking, I was envisioning, man, this would be a great way to set up a spreadsheet and record this information. My question though is, with today's market, kind of analyzing all this information, really doing due diligence, things are moving quickly though, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the challenges, in today's market is, making sure we have all the information, obviously, to be comfortable, to feel confident moving forward. But things are moving and getting the information that we need, but also being able to react quickly.
And making sure that you're not making a mistake by reacting too quickly, right? So if you're looking for a particular school district and it's on the street that you've been looking at before, but you skip the government data and you skip the fact that it's actually across the street and that's a different school district, that could have huge ramifications on price and everything that goes along with it, taxes especially. So knowing where those pieces of information are up front so that you can move quickly is super important.
So Nate, we dig through all of the background information. We find a house or several homes that we want to look at. How do we go see the property? What's the strategy here?
Yeah, so there's generally 2 options to see a property. I guess 3. I'll talk through all 3. But basically, the most common one that people think of, I think more often than not, is an open house, right? Where you're going to have the listing agent present, the doors are open, the house is vacant, and you've got the ability to walk through that with everybody else. And I think the kind of classic example of this is, come by Sunday at 2:00 and there's 30 cars in the driveway and you're touring it with everybody else. And usually those open houses will be, again, on the weekends, and in the listing description or somewhere on the website, you'll be able to see when that open house or when the next open house will be. If it's not listed, they either might not have one or it might be not something that the data was able to be scraped on. So make sure that you ask your agent, is there going to be an open house? But that's only one way to go see the house, right? You have virtual showings as well, or you could do private showing where you could set up through either the listing agent or through your own agent to go see the house on your own time and your own terms. And generally speaking, I recommend doing a private showing. It's a great way to get into the house early so that you can really take things on quickly and you can take your time, right? You're not shuffling around other people. You're not trying to kind of debate who else might be putting in an offer. You're really sort of spending the time that you need to evaluate, is this the property for me? And again, in most cases, your agent can get that set up for a time that's convenient for you. So rather than forcing it into Sunday at 2:00, you could do it at 8:00 at night or 7:00 at night after you've done with a long working day. So lots of options with that.
Yeah, there's nothing like some pressure, right, Nate? When you walk into an open house and 10, 20 other people are looking at the house, you start to feel like, I got to act quickly. So,
exactly.
Nate, I remember going to open houses in the past, and one of the first things that they would have me do is sign in, and then they would ask if I have an agent. And honestly, I never really thought much about that. So tell us more about what's going on there. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to say in that situation?
Yeah, your best bet is just to be honest, right? This is not a test or them trying to, figure out if you're supposed to be there. If it's an open house, you are absolutely supposed to be there, right? Even if you're not a qualified buyer, the whole point of an open house is to come look. And so that's okay. And the best thing you can do is to be honest on that. And what the agent is trying to do there, it's one of the worst kept secrets of the real estate industry, is that open houses are not actually to sell a house. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but truthfully, in age of the internet, they get plenty of marketability by just putting it on the MLS and letting Zillow and everybody else see it, right? What the open house is designed to do is to drum up business for that real estate agent. And so what they're doing is they're saying, if you, Tim, are coming to my open house and you're ready to buy and you're looking at houses in this area, but you don't have an agent to work with, well, then you're the perfect client for me, right? I can help you. I know clearly this area. I'm already working here and I've got a listing. I'd love to help you out with that. And so what we're doing as agents when we're holding that open house is, trying to show the property, certainly, but more often than not, that agent is there to drum up their own business and try to create opportunities for themselves.
So Nate, I go to the open house. I love the house. How do I make an offer? And will using that listing agent save me money? Will that help in the negotiations?
Yeah. And a lot of people assume this, right? Where, I'll use the listing agent because then I'll save money. I won't have my own agent. Right. And so there it is. But let me explain a little bit about how an agent is paid. And I think that will kind of dispel that myth. I'll say this. There are times where that can be the case where it can save you something on commission, but the reality is not very often. So the way that the typical commission is paid is that the seller sits down with a listing agent and they agree on a price. They basically say, okay, I'm going to list your house for you. Here's all the things that I'm going to do in terms of marketing, in terms of exposure, in terms of open houses. And for doing all of that, when the house sells, I need you to pay me 6%, right? And that might be high, that might be low. It totally depends on your area and the property that you're talking about and the price point and all that. But let's just assume it's 6%. Well, that 6%, then gets split between the selling agent and the buying agent. So the person that actually brings a buyer to the property. And so typically it's a 50-50 split, 3% going to the listing agent, 3% going to the buyer. And so if I come as a buyer with no agent whatsoever, now all of a sudden that 6% doesn't have to be split. And so what happens most often is that agent that's listing the property simply keeps the 6%. It's already been agreed upon. It's already been signed by the seller. They don't have to reduce that price at all. You could, in theory, negotiate with them to say, hey, if I don't use an agent, can we get this down to 5%? Or can you take 1% off your commission or something like that? And that may work. But what you're missing is that you don't have an agent representing your best interest. The goal of that listing agent is to sell that property for as much as possible because they're representing their seller's interests. And there are a lot of great real estate agents out there that will do their absolute best to split that difference between representing the buyer and the seller. But the reality is that they negotiated and worked with that seller first, and they have an obligation to treat them as best they can to get them the best price. And so it can look like a savings because you're taking 1% off the commission or whatever. But if you don't have an agent advocating for you, looking for the things that agent isn't there to help you look for, you might miss out on something even greater than that 1%. And it's totally not even worth it.
Nate, does this vary from state to state? I'm not sure of the rules here of whether or not, I don't know what the term is, dual representation, but of where someone's acting as both the buying and the selling. I remember signing disclosures confirming that wasn't happening. Talk to us more about what is or is not allowed here and whether or not that varies state to state.
Yeah, so there's a couple pieces here that we can break down. So the first is whether or not that agent is actually representing you. So what you're referring to is called dual agency, where that agent is representing both the buyer and the seller in a transaction. That idea of dual agency is allowed in some states. It's not allowed in others. Some brokerages actually have a restriction on that. The broker was saying, like, we will never be a dual agent, and here's why. But it's permissible in a lot of areas. The other kind of option or the other more likely scenario is that you're going to be unrepresented. So you are coming in as a customer, not a client. And so the agent that is selling the property represents the seller. They are not representing you in the transaction at all. They are simply helping you through it. So you're a customer, not a client. And so again, I think understanding what that relationship is, if you are going to enter into an agreement like that, and knowing what that means for you in terms of, are you actually my agent or are you simply an agent of the seller and helping me through the transaction?
So Nate, it sounds like having an agent's a win-win, better representation on your end as a buyer and doesn't cost you anything. Am I reading that right?
Yeah. I mean, as long as you have the right agent on your team, someone that knows the market, what to look for, knows how to represent you in negotiations, navigating the contracts, like that is somebody that is a really important asset to you. As agents, we walk through these property deals all the time. You might be a first-time home buyer and have never done this before. And so having somebody on your team that knows how to navigate all those pieces, it can be dramatically important. I mean, I've seen situations where it saves the buyer thousands of dollars because a real estate agent catches something or knows how to ask for something really important. I just had a situation come up recently with a buyer. It came back that there was a leak. It was a really pretty simple leak, but it was at the water main of the house, right where it came in from the city. And so the inspector said, yeah, this needs to be fixed. It's leaking right now. It's probably going to be a couple $100 to fix it. And at first the buyer said, well, okay, that's fine. I'll just handle it myself when I buy the property. But I said, well, hold on. Like, this is a leak that is active, meaning that it has the potential to get worse, meaning it could damage the property. So this is something that the seller should address right away. Like, I'll get this taken care of for you. So a quick phone call to the agent, and they agreed like that to say, oh yeah, we'll handle that completely. So, only a couple $100, but something that they didn't have to deal with after they moved in, something that protected the property from getting worse, and something that, again, going unrepresented, the buyer wouldn't have bothered messing with. So having that right agent, somebody that can really advocate for you, can really make the difference. And again, not to start plugging a service, but that's exactly why we created the concierge service, the home buying concierge, because it's designed to get you connected with really great agents that can have your best interest in mind.
And I would encourage folks to check out episode 160. Nate, you did an episode navigating the home buying process through the concierge service with Shelby Bennett and Bryce Platt. I think that service really comes alive throughout that episode and the value that it has. Walk us through briefly, what is that concierge service? What value does it provide? What can folks expect and where can they go to learn more?
Yeah, so this all came about because when I bought my first property, I had no idea how to find a good real estate agent, right? I just asked a friend, I Googled around, and we ended up with an okay agent. It was fine. It all worked out great, but it just felt like there should be a better process to this. And again, especially if you're somebody that's moving out of state or to a new area, you might not know anybody there. And so how do you wade through the myriad of real estate agents and finding somebody that's actually going to be on your team? So what we created was the real estate concierge service, the whole idea being that you can sit down with me do a 30-minute prep call to really walk through your goals, your budget, what your must-haves are, and starting to figure out what sort of property you're looking for. And then once I've got that information, we'll go out and find a real estate agent that's really a good fit for you. Somebody that's going to be, that has the experience you need, somebody that knows the property types that you're looking for, somebody that, again, is just going to be the right fit on your team, and it takes all that guesswork out of it. And so again, the process is simple. You go online, you can go to yfprealestate.com, or you can go to yourfinancialpharmacist.com/buy-a-home, and you can tap into the book a call with Nate. And we'll sit down, talk about what your needs are. I'll get you connected with an agent, and then you can get off and running. And you can know that you've got somebody on your team that's going to help you through that process. The thing I kind of really have been advocating for recently too is that it's not just us handing off to an agent, right? I stay on your team through that whole process. I just had 2 emails this morning from a client who had a question and they didn't feel like they were getting the full answer from their real estate agent. And they said, "Can you just double check this for me, Nate? I want to have somebody else, that knows what's going on actually answering this." And I confirmed, yes, what the real estate agent is saying is accurate. Totally, you can believe them. And it gives that peace of mind behind the buying process with somebody that knows what they're doing.
Yeah, I think especially for first-time home buyers, right? It's a big decision. We're in this wild market that is. Things are moving so quickly. And I think just to have someone throughout process beginning and end, have a second opinion, examples you just gave, would highly encourage folks check that out. You've done an awesome job, Nate, building this out,
Thanks.
Agents across the country in different areas. A few different ways you can get there. Nate mentioned, go to yourfinancialpharmacist.com, click on buy a home. We'll link to that in the show notes. You can go to yfprealestate.com. So it's not just for primary residents, for those that are looking at investing in real estate and finding an investor-friendly agent, also really, really important. Or you can go to realestaterph.com, and that will all point you to the same place, which is a conversation with Nate. And we'll link to all of those in the show notes. Nate, before we wrap up, got to pick your brain every time that we talk about home buying in the last, seems like since the pandemic. It's each month, it brings a different angle, different, ride. Here we are, believe it or not, seeing interest rates on 30-year fixed mortgages starting to creep up closer and closer and closer to 5%. And that is hard to believe when we look back kind of in the middle of the pandemic. We were seeing 30-year fixed rates below 3%. For a period of time. I remember back to October 2018 when we bought our home, that was in the 4-6 ranges, fixed rates on a 30-year mortgage. And I thought maybe we're not going to see them that high again. And here we are. So we've got now continued supply and demand issues. We've got more buyers than there are properties that are out there. And now we've got rates that are creeping up. And so, I think this affordability of home for first-time home buyers is becoming more and more challenging. Talk to us about what you're seeing and what are some of the challenges that folks are facing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that goes into this, right? And I think the biggest thing, like you said, is the affordability. Because if you're all of a sudden jumping up a percentage point in rate, that could be a couple of $100. It could be even more depending on your market. And so it can really start to affect, okay, well, what kind of house can I afford? And if people are going to be offering over asking price and competing with offers $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 over asking, that is going to start to go away, I think, as these interest rates climb even further. It doesn't mean that the houses are unaffordable, but I think you're going to start to see a shift back down. I do want you to keep in mind too, in perspective, the interest rates we have today, even if it is 5, even 6%, over the historical average, that's still really, really low. It's still below what inflation was over the last 6 months, right? So historically, that's not bad. It's just when you compare that to the last 2 years, it feels like we're in this state of, oh my gosh, we're really on these rising rates and it's never going to end. So put that in a little bit of a historical perspective for yourself before getting too nervous. But I do think we're going to start to see a shift in the market as a result of these changes.
Nate, one last question I have for you. If I'm someone listening and ready, I'm looking now versus, hey, I'm thinking about this over the next 3 to 6 to 12 months. When is the right time to potentially connect with you and ultimately get connected with an agent?
Yeah, I think there's never a bad time to connect with me. I think the best time is probably when you're, around 6 months out or sooner. I mean, it can be you're ready right now and you're ready to look and we just aren't having luck. We need a good agent. Or it can be, again, we're 6 months away and I want to start planning ahead. If you're before that, it's probably a bit early to connect with an agent, but it's a great time to start thinking about your overall finances, your budget, all the other things that we've talked about in the past about getting ready to buy a home. So once you get to that point where you're kind of in the ready state, that's a great time to connect with me. And even if you're not actively looking, we can start to talk through goals, objectives, things that are going to help you make that process that much easier.
Great stuff, Nate. As always, really appreciate your insights to the YFP community and taking the time to come on the show. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
As we conclude this week's podcast, an important reminder that the content on this show is provided to you for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. Information in the podcast and corresponding materials should not be construed as a solicitation or offer to buy or sell any investment or related financial products. We urge listeners to consult with a financial advisor with respect to any investment. Furthermore, the information contained in our archived newsletters, blog posts, and podcasts is not updated and may not be accurate at the time you listen to it on the podcast. Opinions and analyses expressed herein are solely those of your financial pharmacist unless otherwise noted, and constitute judgments as of the dates published. Such information may contain forward-looking statements which are not intended to be guarantees of future events. Actual results could differ materially from those anticipated in the forward-looking statements. For more information, please visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/disclaimer. Thank you again for your support of the Your Financial Pharmacist podcast. Have a great rest of your week.